common to all of us, and it doesn't matter whether you're Lutherans or Baptists or Presbyterians or United Church of Christ or Roman Catholic or all across the whole Christian spectrum, common to all of us is the practice of a table blessing, the practice of saying grace or offering a blessing or something like that as we sit down at the dinner table and we get ready to eat. Probably it happens in your home too. It can happen in a couple of different ways. If you were to join Pam and me at our daughter Linda's house, you would sit down at their table, you would make the sign of the cross, and you would pray a prayer that they all memorized. Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts, which we are about to receive from thy bounty through Christ our Lord. That's how it happened at Linda's house. If you were to come to Pam's house, my house, and sit down at the table, the prayer would probably be, one of us would offer a free, spontaneous kind of prayer, more or less made up on the spot. That's how Pam and I are used to doing it. Linda's used to using the memorized prayer with her family. How many of you use a memorized prayer? That one or one of the other memorized prayers that works as your prayer of blessing in your family? How many of you do the free prayer when you sit down at the table? Maybe you do both. Whichever one seems to work at the time. The memorized formal one is a very strong, good way to introduce the notion of a table prayer to children. Once they have memorized the prayer, they're able to participate, they're able to offer the prayer, able to make it with you. And the free prayer is good too, because it lets us think about what is right here and right now, and offer thanks to God for this moment, what's going on now. Both are common practices all across the Christian tradition. Because you and I know, and nobody had to teach us this, you and I know it right here in our guts, that the table is a blessed place. The table is a blessed place. When we come to the table and we sit down to eat, it ought to be a place where guests become friends, friends become family. It ought to be a place where relationships are nurtured so that they can grow, where the intimacy that is a part of the family and a part of the friendship can be nurtured and sustained and made stronger. We all know that. Nobody had to teach us that. The table is a place of blessing. The table is a blessed place. And so that reading from Genesis may have sounded a little bit odd to you because there was something wrong there. The dinner table became a place where one person tried to take advantage of another, or one person tried to grab what belonged to another, manipulate the weakness of another person. A place that was supposed to be a place of blessing. Now Esau was a big boy by this time. He was not a kid. He was I'm not sure how old, but he was adultish. And he had been living with his kid brother. They were kids only by so much, essentially twins. He'd been living with his kid brother all of his life, so he knew what sort of a man his kid brother had turned into. So he should have been smart enough to protect himself. He should have been smart enough to figure out what was going on. But still, it really is dirty and low down and nasty and tricky for Jacob to use the dinner table as a place to take advantage of his brother. But then these brothers had been at each other right from the start. You heard in the story, Isaac and Rebekah had not been able to conceive children, and so Isaac had prayed to the Lord, and sure enough, Rebekah had conceived twins who were at war in her womb right from the moment they were conceived, and the battle got so intense in her womb that she said, I wish that this pregnancy had never happened. I wish that I could die and be done with it. This pregnancy is going to kill me. Pretty soon, Esau is born, and he came out ruddy and rugged and red. Jacob is born, and he comes out with his hand already grasping his brother's heel. In the biblical tradition, the word Jacob is not a very nice name. It has to do with that grasping and conniving, sort of a snake of a kid already, who was already trying to take advantage of somebody. Thankfully, the meaning of that name sort of slid off of it. I have a grandson named Jacob, and I don't want him to be that kind of a person. And in the Gilman congregation, there was a little guy sitting back there who, as I started talking about Jacob, started, because that's his name. It's possible for us to slide off the meaning of that name. You don't have to live up to it, but this Jacob did. And this family is kind of a dysfunctional family in all kinds of ways. Esau became Isaac's favorite son, and they're off in this corner. And Jacob became Rebekah's favorite son, and they're off in this corner. Kind of a strange way to put a family together. These biblical families are not always the most noble families. Jacob liked to take care of stuff at home, especially when it involved sort of being able to grab things and tuck them into himself. Esau enjoyed going out into the woods and hunting and doing all that sort of thing. And so the family feud was sort of off and running right from the start. And there are historically reasons to believe that the story ended up in the Bible as a way of trying to explain animosities that have been going on in the Middle East from the very beginning right up until this day. Ancient animosities that still continue because of these two brothers who, right from birth, could not get along. So the story, as we heard it, Jacob is at home cooking a stew. And Esau is out hunting in the field, and he comes home, apparently the hunt has not gone so well. And he comes home famished and barren and desperate for some food. And Jacob sees the opportunity to grab the big prize for the brothers. He says to his brother, "Sell me your birthright. Swear it that you will give it to me. Sell me your birthright, and then I will give you something to eat." Now this birthright is a big deal. This birthright is a very special gift that a father gives to his oldest son. When father was at the end of his life and ready to die, he would call his oldest son to him and give him the very special blessing that belongs to the oldest son. Now this blessing included a fair chunk of the family's wealth, whatever that turned out to be, but it also included a lot of responsibility. That eldest son was responsible for his mother until she died. That eldest son was responsible for all of his sisters until they were married and out on their own. He was responsible for his kid brothers until they were able to get out on their own. So he was responsible for the well-being of the clan. He was expected to take his father's place. And so it is proper for him to have some extra wealth so that he can do the things that he needs to do for the family, for the clan. And he also receives a special blessing from God, so that he has the vigor and the wisdom and the understanding to do what he needs to do. This is no small thing, this birthright. And Jacob wants it, and he finds a way to get it. Yeah, I'll give you some stew. You give me the birthright. Esau apparently sort of forgot about this little promise. You can read in chapter 27, a number of years later, when it is time now for Isaac, who is old and blind and deaf and about ready to die, to call his son in and offer him the blessing, the birthright that belongs to him. And Rebekah overhears the conversation that Isaac has with his son and decides to make sure that that old exchange gets worked out. And so she turns the table on her blind and deaf and old and feeble husband, and Jacob plays along with her hand in glove. You can read the story in chapter 27. This conniving, scheming, deceitful snake of a man ends up being the one who now bears God's blessing into a new generation. Which seems like an odd kind of thing, that God would be able to work through this kind of a crazy, messed up family, but this is how it was in the story. And some have said that this is maybe an example of God's grace that will overcome even an ungracious use of the table. Maybe so. Maybe so. But still, the table is supposed to be a place of grace. The table is supposed to be a place of blessing. The table is supposed to be a place where a guest becomes a friend, or a friend becomes part of the family, where relationships are nurtured, where relationships are able to grow. The table is a place of blessing, including this table. This table. One of the things the church has done very well down through the years, you may have heard the expression, fence the table. You heard that expression? Put a fence around this table, a verbal fence, a fence that it makes it very clear who is allowed to come to the table and who has to stay away. And sometimes the fence is very high and very strong, and sometimes the fence is not so high and not so strong. The philosophy, the understanding comes from just a short passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, which is, some people understand it in a certain particular way. I'm not sure that you have to understand it that way, but they understand it that there are certain people who, if they come to that table, it is wrong, and if they come to that table, they will be damned for it. And so they build a big fence around the table. Some of you experienced that. If you go to Mass at the Roman Catholic Church, please don't go to the table. You're not welcome. It's not for you. The fence is higher than you are. If you go to the Missouri Synod Church, please don't take it. The fence is tall, and you're on the wrong side of the fence. That's how they understand it. was years ago, when I was still in Paxton, my first church. I don't remember the circumstances, but on a Sunday night, I was at this Southern Baptist church for some kind of a service, and they were celebrating communion as a part of that service. One of the deacons came up to me. I'm one of the pastors in the town, fairly well known at that point. And he comes up to me and he says, "Have you been baptized?" I scratched my head, and then he said to me, "Were you," of course I have been baptized at that point, "were you immersed into the water like that?" Now, as a family quirk, it just happens that the family I grew up in, that's how we were baptized. We were at confession of faith, we were immersed in the water, and so I was eligible to take communion in this Southern Baptist church. If I had been married to Pam at the time, by a quirk of her family history, she was baptized like this. We would be sitting in the same pew, I would be able to take communion, she would not be able to take communion. That's just how they understood it. That's their way. Not our way. We practice what is called open communion. We invite everyone to the table almost. In many churches, the invitation is bracketed by the words, "if you have been confirmed." And very often in many of our churches, the fence comes down from the table on Confirmation Sunday. I was pastoring a church like that, the Manunk Church. In our Logos program on Wednesday night, the 3rd and 4th graders spent a month studying the sacrament of Holy Communion. They did all the different theological stuff, and they walked through how it is celebrated and so on. And at the end of that study, the last Wednesday night, they baked bread that would be used the following Sunday for communion. Now these 3rd and 4th graders, down in the church kitchen, baked the bread. They were able to, the pieces of the bread that didn't come out quite right as they cut it up and so on, they were able to eat those pieces down in the kitchen. But the following Sunday, they could even put the bread on the plate, and when it was time for the offering, they brought the bread down, and the bread that they had made, and they put the bread they had made on the table. And when it touched that table, they couldn't touch it. And some of those 3rd and 4th graders started to scratch their heads, which began a discussion in the congregation about when is it appropriate for who to take communion. Now that congregation, as it struggled its way through the question, ended up staying with its old tradition, and it is still the case that in that congregation the fence comes down from the table on Confirmation Sunday. I don't know if that's the right decision. I don't know if that's the wrong decision. That's the decision they made, and I don't know what decision this congregation has made. What about an unbeliever? This gets a little bit dicey. Somebody who isn't a Christian. Is this a family dinner? Do only family members come to this dinner? Any of you ever been the odd person out of the family dinner? Everybody else was family but you. It felt a little strange until somebody from the family sort of pulled you in and got you involved in the conversation and helped you find your place. And after a while, you began to understand that family in a new way because they knew how to welcome you. They knew how to bring you into the family. And that tells you something really important about that family. What if this is a sacrament? You and I believe it is a sacrament. Not all Christians believe it is. What if this is a sacrament, which means that God is the one who does whatever gets done? That somehow or other, God is at work in that bread, and God is at work in that wine, and in the eating and the drinking, we somehow taste the goodness of the Lord in some kind of special way? What if somebody comes who is hungry? Somebody who comes thirsty, yearning somehow to taste the goodness of the Lord? Are they welcome to come taste? Are they invited to the table? I think about my friend Giselle. Giselle is a Muslim. Now, she's not Al-Qaeda, she's not a terrorist, she's not going to strap a bomb on and blow anything up. Giselle is a Muslim in the same way as you and I are Christians. She feels about those people from the Muslim tradition the same way you and I feel about so-called Christians who go around and bomb abortion clinics or make their protests at funerals in the name of Christ. She understands her faith, and she practices her faith faithfully in the same way as you and I understand our faith and practice it faithfully. But in this post 9/11 world, and Giselle is Muslim and she is open about it, Giselle has been told by so-called Christians that because she is Muslim, she ought to be raped and beaten and thrown out of the country by so-called Christians, which has left a certain taste in her mouth about Christians. What if Giselle were here this morning? What if Giselle were here? Would we invite her to the table? Would she be able, if she came to the table, to taste something different about Jesus? To taste something different about Christians? This table of blessing, who is it for? Who is it for?